Welcome to Sense of Style. I'm Stuart. The 8 best fresh fragrances according to you. Now, I know it's mid-September and the worst of the heat is over, but even where I live in Canada with global warming, with climate change, it just keeps getting hotter and hotter. I got at least 6 to 8 weeks more of in between weather where it could be hot, it could be cool. You don't know. So fresh fragrances, I don't know, they're still good for a while, and people love fresh fragrances. In general, they usually pull well, and I did a pull, and fresh fragrances were the favorite. Speaking of polls, that's where the data on this is coming from. So I have done polls for all over the last 7 months. They're small polls, but I do a lot of them, and there's a lot of data on fresh fragrances. Every single fragrance that I talk about today is fresh, and every single one was won at least twice. So these are fragrances you like. Fragrance number 1, this is Acqua di Gio Profumo, and I'm also including the Acqua di Gio Parfum in this because I usually include them together in polls, and this cleaned up. This had 7 poll victories, including best fragrance of all time. So yeah, I think this is the most popular of the fresh fragrances. And this and the Parfum, they're both, I think, the strongest versions of the fragrance that is most similar to the original Acqua di Gio. And that makes sense that they'd be really popular because Acqua di Gio, that DNA is just hugely popular. Profondo goes in a slightly different direction, but I think Profumo and the Parfum are the closest to the original. And they are in Parfum form. So you're getting about 8, well, I get 8 hours. And my skin doesn't do well with fresh fragrances. But yeah, 8 hours with this. It is a thick and sticky fragrance. The weird thing about Profumo and the Parfum is that you look at the aromatic notes in them. For instance, this has sage, rosemary, and geranium. Those are all very kind of green herbal notes. You stuck that in any other fragrance and people would be going, well, that's old school. And yet, you stick it with C notes and a little bit of incense and everybody loves it. Fragrance number 2, this is Montblanc Explorer, and this won a couple of polls, including favorite Montblanc, and walked it. And I noticed that this and Club de Nuit Intense Man, which are both Aventus style fragrances, just walk away with any polls that they're in. They do really, really well. And yet Aventus does not do well, which is kind of interesting. I think it speaks to the price of Aventus. Anyway, the more I get into the fragrances, though, I used Aventus style. I didn't say Aventus clones because I'm not sure that this really is a clone. It doesn't come across as fruity and as sweet and fruity as Club de Nuit Intense Man, and that's not surprising. The main note listed in this is bergamot. It's not pineapple. So bergamot is more like a lime or a lemon kind of thing, and pineapple, we know it's quite sweet. So yeah, they are a little bit different, and this doesn't have the birch note either, whereas this and a lot of Aventus clones do. So I think this is meant to be a twist on Aventus, a more subtle version, a less punchier version. Look, it still smells an awful lot like it, but I think it's meant to be a little bit toned down. So in future, I'm going to be talking about this as a twist because, let's face it, this has akagali wood, which is an aroma chemical, it's a little bit peppery and patchouli. That's not birch. Bergamot is not pineapple, and this is not Aventus. Fragrance number 3, this is Bleu de Chanel Eau de Toilette. And I'm making a distinction because the Eau de Parfum has won some polls, and this has won some polls. I usually poll them differently, and this particular one won 3 polls, including most versatile, against some real heavy hitters. So this is supremely popular fragrance, even though the EDP is a little bit more popular, but this is also more fresh because it doesn't have the amber. The weird thing about Bleu de Chanel, though, is you look at the note breakdown for it. It looks pretty standard. Off the top, you've got grapefruit and lemon. Okay, that's fine. And then you got 4 woods in the base. Okay, it's a woody citrus. Got a little bit of ginger, got a little bit of mint, and then a hint of incense. I mean, there's nothing special about the note breakdown, and yet this is almost 15 years old, and it's still popular. It's still selling. There's something to do with the Chanel blending, the Chanel high quality that makes this one special. Fragrance number 4 is Artisan Pure by John Varvatos, and this won 3 polls, and including an important one, which was best inexpensive summer fragrance. The problem is that this also won a poll on best inexpensive summer fragrance. So the third poll was this one against this one, and this one won by 5%. So this is the one I'm going with. And it makes sense given that the poll where this one is amongst the fragrance community. Because if you look at sales, this one sells like crazy for the general public. But you know, the fragrance community and the general public are not the same thing. People in the fragrance community are open to other things like green fragrances, green style fragrances. And actually, when it comes to summer heat, that works better. And when it comes to, well, not just inexpensive, but most summer designer fragrances, this is the greenest. This is the most bitter, and it's the most refreshing. This is actually, I think, kind of the equivalent, the designer equivalent of Neo by Xerjoff. This is sweeter, though. I compared them head to head. This is definitely sweeter than Neo, but they both work on the same principle. They have a lot of citrus notes, and then Neo has a very green note that's prominent. This has 4 citrus notes, and it has petitgrain as a very green note, and petitgrain is a very bitter green herb. And so, yeah, they both kind of work the same way. They're not exactly the same. This one you get 4 hours, you get about 10 hours with Neo. But to be fair, John Varvatos fragrances have a bad reputation for performance. But if you factor in what this actually is, which is a fresh fragrance, the performance for this one is not bad for a Varvatos. You do get 4 hours. You don't get a ton of projection, but you don't get a ton of projection with bitter citrus fragrances to begin with. So, yeah, as far as performance goes, as far as popularity goes, this is a good one. Fragrance number 7 is not a single fragrance. It's 2 fragrances, and these are the 2 most popular of the new releases in 2024 that also happen to be fresh. And they were Chanel Allure Homme Sport Superleggera and Versace Eros Energy. And oddly enough, Jean-Paul Gaultier's Le Beau Paradise Garden did not do well in my polls anyway. So, yeah, you seem more interested in the other 2. And quite frankly, they both won 2 polls. And Superleggera, though, I think there was definitely more interest. And, I mean, Superleggera has been out for plenty of time now, and we kind of figured out what it is. And, you know, it's good. It's not super light. Superleggera, I mean, super light. It's not that. You know, it's got decent performance. It's very, very pleasant. It's very nice. It's a little bit of a musky citrus, which is, to be fair, that's what Olivier Polch does. He likes using musks, and Superleggera is a musky version of the Allure Homme Sport line. So, you know, it's all good. 2 things. $170, which is an awful lot of money for a designer fragrance. And the second thing is, it's not really that different. You know, like, it's been 14, almost 15 years since we've had a new line from Chanel. So I think people were hoping for something that was going to blow their socks off. I'm not sure that Superleggera did it. So, you know, it's an okay release. But Versace Eros Energy, and there's a couple of reviewers that I watch pretty regularly and I trust, and they both really liked it. And you know, all I did was look at the note breakdown for Eros Energy, and I'm like, that's different. You know, that is not something that we have seen in a Versace. There are 6 citrus notes. I think they used them all up, all the citrus notes. I don't know. Maybe they did. I'm not sure. But 6 citrus notes in the top, and then add blackcurrant to it as well. So very citrusy, very fruity. By all accounts, people really like it. There is a dispute, though, in the fragrance community. Some people compare it to Aventus. Some compare it to Aventus Cologne. And then other people are like, oh, it's nothing like Aventus. So I haven't tried it. So I haven't tried either. So I'm not sure where I fit on it. I'm more inclined to believe the Aventus Cologne people and the people that say it doesn't smell like Aventus than the pure Aventus people. But it doesn't really look like it would be Aventus to me. It just looks interesting. And even if it is like Aventus Cologne, you know, we don't have a lot of stuff like that. And certainly there's nothing like that in Versace. So I'm looking forward to that one. Fragrance number 6 is Versace Dylan Blue, and I love this fragrance. It won 3 different polls, including a big one, which is best fragrance for 24 and under. And boy, do I agree with that. I mean, it just does so many things right. It is a darker version of the Dior Sauvage DNA. It doesn't have Sauvage performance, but the performance is very good. It's got a little bit of incense, so yeah, it's darker. It's not exactly the same. It's a compliment beast. The price is reasonable. What more can you say? You know, if anybody, a random person met me in the street and said, pick one fragrance to recommend to the generic public, I'm going with this one. Fragrance number 7, YSL EDP. This one's odd in polling because if this goes up against something else in another line, a good fragrance, it'll get killed. But I've had 2 polls on your favorite YSL, and I put some heavy hitters from YSL on the polls. And this has won both of them handily. So people are basically saying, yeah, you know, this is the best YSL. And I know a lot of people like it. It's a good house. So yeah, this one, you know, there's a lot going for it. Now, the weird thing about this one when it comes to the notes is it's got a little bit of everything. It's kind of all over the place. You've got a little hint of apple, a little hint of ginger. There's a little bit of amber in it. You've got that sage note, which is, you know, very herbal. You know, you've got some freshness. There's bergamot. It has everything, but it's blended nicely and it has good performance. It sounds a little bit like Bleu de Chanel, except this one is much more like all over the place than Chanel. That looks like a standard woody citrus, but it's interesting that they made so many different types of notes work in this one. And I think it's a good creation. Finally, we've got Prada L'Homme, and Prada L'Homme won 4 different polls that were all over the place, including Best Introvert, Best Work Fragrance, a couple of other ones. And yeah, why is Prada L'Homme on a fresh fragrance list? You know, its iris isn't particularly fresh, and it's got a fair bit of amber in it, so like, why? Well, it has 3 fresh floral notes and black pepper. You know, you got violet, you've got geranium, and you've got neroli. All of those are fresh, and pepper. Yeah, it's a fresh fragrance to a certain extent. It's not exactly the typical fresh, but yeah, it's fun. Everybody loves this one. Anyway, you like these fragrances. Hopefully you like this video. Thanks for watching.